Okay, it tells me we're live, so I'm going to start talking and introduce myself as I make sure that you can actually see and hear me. There's a little bit of a 20-second delay between when I speak and what you hear. So in the comments, let me know if you see my lips moving and can't hear me, or if you hear me but can't see me, and we'll make sure that we get that straightened out. Hi, everybody. Welcome. It's been really neat just in those few minutes before we started looking at in the chat where everybody's from. We have people who are staying up late and watching from the other side of the world, from Australia, from India. We have students in watercolor lovers in Spain, in Holland, in South Africa, and all over the United States, and here in Canada. So it's really, this is one reason why I love watercolor, why I love teaching online, is I get to pull together this amazing community of watercolor lovers from all over the world. And it actually gives me flashbacks to when I was a teenager, because when I was 12 years old, my parents moved to Papua New Guinea. And they were missionaries, and we worked in community with not just getting to know the people of Papua New Guinea and their unique culture and way of life, but we also had other coworkers from all over the world. So there's a piece of me, I think, because I was a kid in kind of a multicultural environment. That's one thing I really love about teaching watercolor. Anyhow, I'm just rambling, and that's a little bit of an aside. I know you want to hear about watercolor mastery. That's why you're here. Something in those two words resonated with you, and has you here wanting to know more. And I think that's probably because you're a lot like me. Fell in love with watercolor, and yet yearn to make exceptional work. And that's what we're going to talk about today, that drive to really get what's in your heart out on paper, and how we get to the point where we're able to do that maybe more freely than the way you've been feeling lately. I've got a lot of material to go through, because I don't just want to tell you what this course is about. I want to give you a little bit of my history and why I'm teaching a course on watercolor mastery. And I want to really communicate well to you so that you can make an informed decision about whether or not you want to commit to watercolor mastery, this 6-week course. A lot of people do these live kind of broadcasts as like a sales pitch. We really want to convince you that you need this thing and you have to do it. I'm not here to do that. And yet I'm still nervous, because I feel like I don't want to come across as like I'm giving this big sales pitch. Really, what's important to me is making sure that you are ready. I don't want you to come to the course and feel like you totally are drowning in a wealth of information that you're just not quite ready for. I don't want you to be a part of something that doesn't align with your own personal goals and objectives for your artistic journey. And so we're going to spend a lot of time talking about what you can expect from watercolor mastery. This is, I've got some slides I've made to help me keep on task and not ramble, which is already too late. And I'll pop those up so that we have those kind of visuals, because I'm a visual person. It really helps me to be able to see and be able to stay on point with my pictures. So we're talking about watercolor mastery, and this is a 6-week online course that I created. It's probably about 18 months ago since we ran it for the very first time. And what happened, well, we'll get there. Notes, Angela, notes, follow your notes. Okay, this is Watercolor Mastery is my 6-week intensive watercolor course. I've been teaching watercolor online for about 5 or 6 years now. Depending on whether or not you count like my very early beginnings posting videos on YouTube, or whether we're counting from the very first course I made. And I've taught a bunch of watercolor courses, over 20 actually, and Watercolor Mastery is a little different from all of those. It's a 6-week course that we only run twice a year, because I really think a lot of the power and impact of this course comes from doing it together. The goal of the course is to transform your watercolor journey, to help you bridge the gap that I think there is often found between beginner instruction in watercolor. Online, you can find a ton of tutorials, step by step, how to paint something. but that transition to becoming your own artist, a strong independent artist, that is often lacking. And so that's really the goal of Watercolor Mastery. The course is most effective when you're ready for it. Again, this is not a sales pitch so much as an information session designed to help you know if this is the next step you should be taking or not. It's basically a pre-lesson before we jump into the course, which starts October 11th. So we're going to talk about, let me see here. That works better. We're going to talk about the course itself and what it is. First of all, it is a 6-week course. It starts October 11th and runs through, the lesson content will drip out between October 11th and November 22nd. Our goal is to wrap it up before we start launching into Christmas planning, before American Thanksgiving. And actually, it really bridges really nicely between Canadian Thanksgiving and American Thanksgiving, which I think is kind of funny. It's an interactive course. It's got a bunch of different elements that you can use to help you grow, and you can use them in a way that works for you. So we have pre-recorded lessons, and those you get to take. We get a set of lessons each week based on a particular theme, and we'll be talking about those themes. Additionally, we have a weekly live session. That's optional to attend. I don't want anybody missing sleep because it doesn't work in their time zone. So we record it live, but make it available for those who can't be there. And then we have a student community where you students can interact, much the same as you're interacting here on the chat, but you also get the opportunity to post your work and receive feedback from your fellow artists and from me. And that's that third bullet point there, instructor critiques and coaching. I'm there in the group as a instructor, and I can help to guide you to learn how to analyze your own work, learn where to build on your strengths and strengthen your weaknesses. And then the student community itself, we don't just make that available through the 6 weeks of the course, but you actually get to continue to have access right up until the middle of January. We've stretched the time out a little longer than we usually do because of Christmas, and we know not a lot of painting gets done for those of you who celebrate Christmas and are really busy during that season. So we extended it out till the middle of January. I have sprinkled in a few testimonials from students. One thing that's really great about having taught this workshop before is that I get to share with you some of the feedback that I've heard from students who have taken the course. And it's really humbling and it's really a privilege to see students grow and be transformed through Watercolor Mastery. Hillary says, my thanks to you for designing and teaching the Watercolor Mastery class is heartfelt. Your passion in the watercolor art and your love for teaching inspired all of us, your students, to become more free and fearless. Your words excited and encouraged all of us in our attempt to find or develop our own style. You showed us how to have confidence in ourselves and be our favorite artists. And the amazing thing is that we all responded. I painted more paintings in the past 6 weeks during class than I had in the past 3 years when I first picked up watercolor painting. And what you taught us will stay with us for a long time. Thank you so much for this gift. That's from Hillary, one of my past Watercolor Mastery students. And I love this testimonial because it's so perfectly fit with my objectives for this course. And we'll be talking about that more. If you're resonating with some of her feedback, you might just be in the right place. Okay, so first of all, when I first started thinking about teaching a course, Watercolor Mastery, I had to first figure out what I didn't want to share, what the message that I didn't want to communicate. I think we have a lot of misconceptions about what makes a watercolor master. Sometimes we think a watercolor master makes flawless paintings. That is not true. I have never painted a perfect painting, and actually I kind of like it that way. And I'll explain to you why. It's not replicating your mentor's style of art, becoming a clone of whoever your instructor is. Watercolor mastery is not reaching a level plateau of skill and style where you've just arrived and you've learned all there is to learn. It's not knowing everything there is to know about watercolor. I learn something new almost every time I paint. And it's not even certainty regarding your path as an artist. I don't know what kind of artist I'm going to be next year or the year after, or even sometimes next week. And I've made peace with that. And it's actually really exciting. It's actually a good thing. I want to tell you my story. So I've shared this very silly photo of me painting from, well, I don't think it's from the heart. I think it's more from some kind of mania in this picture. One of my one of my workshop students told me this is what she imagines when I talk about painting using your a looser stroke and you're using your whole body. And so I had to take a picture of that for her. This is a little bit about me. I wanted to share a little bit about my journey, because when I first started thinking about teaching watercolor mastery, and I have to look at you to do this, when I first started thinking about making a course called Watercolor Mastery, I couldn't help but think, who am I to teach a course about becoming a watercolor master? I don't have a degree in art. I don't sell paintings for thousands of dollars. I've never been considered among the elite in the world of watercolor. One of my goals is still to make a feature in a major watercolor magazine. That hasn't happened. So why would I teach a course called Watercolor Mastery? And you know, maybe there's somebody better who could teach that. And as I started thinking about it, I realized that I'm actually the perfect person to teach this course because of all of those things. Because I didn't know how to master watercolor, because I didn't know when I started painting if I had what it took to become an artist. I didn't know if I could create the art I yearned to make. And not only did I not know any of those things, I didn't know if I had what it took. I just didn't know if I was good enough. And I had to learn about watercolor on my own, alongside my regular life, while having babies and raising a family and muddling along. There wasn't even YouTube when I first started painting. You know, I had watercolor magazines, and I had like 8 hours, 16 hours of watercolor classes, and that was it. And so I had to kind of figure out how to grow as an artist in these little corners of the space and time that I could carve out in the midst of my busy life. And that made me basically a personal trailblazer for my own artistic journey. And one thing I've realized is that as a trailblazer, you don't see the path until you look behind you. And it's in looking back that showed me that even when I didn't think I knew what I was doing, I was actually guiding myself to a place where I could be my own favorite artist, where I could love my art just with a real passion from my heart. And I that's really where my paintings, I get to make some really beautiful work. And my paintings come from the sheer thrill of seeing color flow across paper, of embracing my love for color and the quirky little things that make me unique as a person. That's also what makes me my own favorite artist. There is an incredible freedom in finding your own heart-guided path. And it is truly what makes me my own favorite artist. And I believe that every artist can become their own favorite artist, just like I did. Originally, my goal was to be a botanical artist, to paint really, really realistically and really, really detailed. And I just, somewhere along the way, I found myself, I was actually painting in the mall. And so there were people walking past, and I had like a little display of my art in one of these empty storefronts. And as I was painting, doing a demonstration, and there was like nobody in the mall, so I was basically painting by myself. But anyhow, as I was doing this demonstration, I did the first layer wash. And I know some of you commented that wet and wet is your favorite kind of painting. And it really was for me then too. And what I saw was, in this first layer where all the colors were flowing really beautifully, my heart just said, oh, I love this. I wish I could just stop and call this painting finished right here. But nobody would understand it. And I kept painting. But nobody would understand. It was kind of the death knell for that painting, because I overworked the painting. It's around here somewhere. It's not pretty. It's a mess. And I lost that beautiful spark of light that I saw in that first layer. And I realized that I didn't realize until later that I had the freedom to choose to stop whenever I wanted. And it was actually in seeing other artists do those things that I'd always dreamed of doing that I was inspired to embrace that freedom and to start making my own choices without worrying about what other people would think. And through that process, I actually made connections with people. People connect with my work and resonate to it because it is authentically me. And that's what they see. That's what they're drawn to. And when your art has that spark of life that comes from you and who you are, that has more appeal and power than any technical skill you could show off. So let's talk about what a watercolor artist. Let me find my slide here. Oh, I have more pictures. This is just a shot of my family, that little family, that the babies that I raised while I was teaching myself to paint in watercolor are teenagers now. And this is my family at one of our favorite places. And if you've been a member of my Fearless Artist community, you very likely might have seen that waterfall in one of my online lessons. And we'll talk about a little later about the Fearless Artist community and how that lines up with the watercolor mastery. I know people have questions about that, so we'll talk about that in a bit. Anyhow, so that's my people, and they're all creatives. My husband builds hot rods, and my kids, my son makes things out of cardboard, and my girls, they do all kinds of stuff, decorating and painting, and they're music. Actually, my oldest plays piano, so we have lots of creativity in our home. Okay, here's another testimonial. And then after this testimonial, I'm going to start explaining what a watercolor master is, because I've told you what they aren't. And so we'll move to that next thing. Michelle says, my painting has improved in every way as a result of taking this course. I really wanted to put all of myself into the course and keep up with the lessons and group discussions. And I had to paint practically every day for 6 weeks in order to do that. In doing so, I developed the habit of painting daily, and because of that, I would say that this is the most worthwhile watercolor course I've ever taken. I love the discussion pages and the weekly recaps. It really helped to feel supported and encouraged by Angela and the other members, and to give that back. Michelle's mentioning a couple things that I think are important to mention. It's really that investment of time that was going to make the biggest difference when you take watercolor mastery. Setting aside that 6 weeks, or as much time as you can give during that 6 weeks, and it doesn't have to be every day, but it definitely helps to make that habit. Even if it's just 15 minutes a day, you can see growth in 6 weeks. Michelle also mentioned the discussion pages. We have now an artist community, so it's phrased a little differently, but it is the same thing. To be able to interact as a community, not just to feel supported by other members, but to help support others who are growing as well. And that's a big part of the course as well. Okay, what is a watercolor master? Well, I believe that a watercolor master understands art and design principles and chooses how to apply them. They don't understand every little detail about them necessarily. My favorite thing is thinking, what would this be if it was as simplified as possible? But when you know the principles, it makes it easier to make choices about how to make them work for your own creative practice. Number 2, a watercolor master seeks to build technical skill in watercolor by curating her education. I believe you know best what you need to help you grow as an artist. And so when you have a sense that, it's time to focus on color theory, or it's time to focus on mark making, or maybe I need to work on value more, you make that choice. You choose who's going to teach you, when they're going to teach you, and what you need to learn. You curate your education. So it's not that you stop learning, you're still learning, but you get to make those decisions about who teaches you what and when and where. A watercolor master rejects fear and paints with authenticity and emotion. We choose authenticity over technical skill, even sometimes, over just showing off how good we are. Rather, we want to show our heart. And rejecting fear means training yourself to see the positive, training yourself to identify those areas where maybe you're afraid of failing, or where you're struggling with mindset, and to counter them with positive mindset, with thoughts that will help you grow as an artist. A watercolor master has an understanding of the motivations that drive their art. For me, I'm very tied to the landscape. In seeing the beauty in the world and painting it, I connect to it, and I find my little place in the world, and I get to celebrate the beautiful things that I see every day. I learn how to look for them too. A watercolor master has made peace with the ongoing learning process. I've been painting for coming up on 25 years, and every single time I start a painting, I think to myself, I have no idea how to paint this. I teach myself how to paint every day. How do I paint this thing? How do I paint it my way? How do I paint it as an artist who is growing and changing? Watercolor Master knows that mistakes are tools for growth, not signs of failure. And if you're seeing any of these in your own artistic practice right now, I'd love for you to comment in the chat. Just let me know if this is connecting with you. And mistakes, I think sometimes we're afraid of mistakes. We're afraid of making mistakes in our work. Recognizing that when I make a mistake, it means I'm stepping out of my comfort zone. I'm not just sitting in the same rut doing the things I know how to do. I'm growing my skills. I'm teaching myself something new. A watercolor master is motivated by the heart more than by outside influences or expectations. And this is a battle I fight every day. I want other people to like my work, but I need to make it satisfy me first. And I'm always working to connect with that. And finally, a watercolor master is his or her own favorite artist. And I used to think that was a really bold and arrogant thing to say, maybe, but it actually is a beautiful truth, because my favorite artist, the one who's not me, artists that I admire, are making beautiful work all the time, but maybe 1 in 10 might connect with me deeply. Whereas when I make my own paintings, I get to choose as successes the ones that connect with me deeply every single time. So rather than 1 out of 10 paintings being, something that resonate, it's every one. And the ones that don't, the ones in between that don't make that really deep connection that I've created, those are the ones that develop the successes, the ones that have that heart-led or heart-guided authenticity. Here's a peek in my studio. I want to invite you into my studio in 6 weeks, for 6 weeks of learning together, starting October 11th. In my space, this is where I drink my coffee. This is where I play with color. This is where I find beautiful things coming off of my brush. And it's a haven for me. And it's a place where I've given myself permission to just make beautiful messes, even if nothing turns out. And I think there's a quote that says, I just want to make beautiful things, even if nobody cares. And my feeling would be, I just want to make the process of painting beautiful, even if nothing ever turns out. Janet says, I didn't think I was ready for a mastery course, but I am so glad I joined. This is the most progress I have made in about 2 years. And I actually think, just interrupting Janet here, I actually think that if you don't feel like you're ready, that doesn't mean you're not ready. Sometimes we're just on the edge of ready, and we have to make ourselves ready by actually doing the thing. So just food for thought. I was always painting with a tutorial or online class, as I had no confidence or skill really to paint on my own. During this course, I started to put together the skills with my own heart and to begin to paint alone. This forced me to confront my lack of confidence and to just paint. I am painting with more confidence and feeling like the outcome is my own. I am liking more of what I do and finally really believing that I will get better if I just keep painting. I love that watercolor mastery can help you have faith in your growth and in your journey. That's so exciting for me. Okay, so we're going to take a look at the principles that will be covered in Watercolor Mastery. This is the bones of the course. And even if you don't take Watercolor Mastery, if you don't plunge into the course, you can still actually learn and grow from just hearing these 6 principles and kind of processing them on your own. I'm giving away some good stuff here. First of all, before we start though, I do have one more list that somehow is not showing up on my screen. Are you ready for Watercolor Mastery? And I have 6 signs here that this course is right for you, or that this course might be right for you. Number 1, if you have been building skill in watercolor techniques and are feeling a little bit, and are starting to own those techniques a little bit. I know when we're just starting learning watercolor, we really struggle with things like water ratios, how much water and paint to use, and blooms and figuring out drying times and things like that, mastering that whole movement of water and paint on the paper. And if you're really finding a lot of your brain taken up with just controlling watercolor, you're probably still in that early beginner stage where you just need to put on those brush miles and do a lot of painting. And actually in the new year, I will have some beginner courses, a live interactive beginner course to go through. And I have lots of online courses that are ready to go right now out of the gate if you're a beginner. But if you're starting to feel like, techniques, I'm starting to get an understanding of them. I'm starting to see paint do what I want it to do. And I really want to start putting my own style into my work now. That is looking to develop your personal style. You might be ready for watercolor mastery. You might also be ready for watercolor mastery if you're finding yourself dissatisfied with copying reference photos, just painting exactly what you see in your photo, or following step-by-step paint like me style lesson formats. If you want a principle-based guidance, you might very well be ready for watercolor mastery. We're focusing on principles, not so much the step-by-step. Maybe you feel like you're ready for, or maybe you feel like you're at a crossroads in your watercolor journey, but you're not sure what direction to go. I can help you with that too. We create some kind of markers that you can seize onto and take those to lead you into that next phase of your journey. You might be ready for watercolor mastery if your paintings are technically accurate, but you feel like they don't really have any personality. You want to put more of you into your work. You might be ready for watercolor mastery if you're willing to fail and make mistakes, trusting that you're learning in the process. When I teach an in-person workshop, one thing I tell my students is not to put pressure on themselves to turn out a good painting during the workshop. It's a learning time. Give yourself room to absorb everything, to work it out on the paper, to develop skills without that judgment of did the painting turn out or not. And finally, you might be ready for watercolor if you really, really love watercolor, if it's your passion and you yearn to paint from the heart. If you're seeing that joy that I have in watercolor painting and you want a piece of that for yourself, I can help you with that. Come into my studio and paint with me. I spent 6 months creating watercolor mastery, and I revise it all the time, tweaking bits slightly so it suits my students even more. And when I was working on creating watercolor mastery, I actually rewrote my lesson plan 3 times. I was so determined to create a course that met my students' needs and provided the transformational opportunities I knew were possible. I really had to look inward and think, what was it like for me as making that transition into that independent artist, that independent heart-guided artist. I only teach this course twice a year. And again, the interactive 6-week journey gives us the opportunity to adapt the lesson principles to be as individual as the artist taking the course. I like sharing these testimonials from past students, but as I go into October and start thinking about this new group of students, I'm thinking about you and what you might need, rather than what worked for students who took the course in the spring or last year. We really want to take these principles and let them be flexible enough to adjust to where we're at. Okay, so we're going to look at the course outline and what students will be learning over the next 6 weeks. So we start with week 1. Whoops, zipping ahead. Sorry, I've got very eager keys. Week 1 is called the Perfect Practice Principle. This is a time when we kind of stop and analyze what you've been doing up until now as you teach yourself watercolor. Is what you're doing working, or are you repeating yourself and hoping for a different result? We're going to be analytical about how we use technique to see where we might be working ineffectively, doing the same thing over and over again and hoping for a different result. It's like the definition of madness or something I think I heard once. I don't know about that, but it definitely isn't as creative as we'd like to be. Be willing to challenge what you've always assumed is the right thing to do in order to break new ground and move ahead. And sometimes that's stuff like, well, maybe you heard once upon a time that watercolor artists should only use transparent colors. Being willing to challenge that and say, well, maybe for my watercolor practice, I want to bring in some opaque colors. That can be one of those times when you're adapting what you think you know to change things up and see new growth in your work. We adapt what we're learning to suit our practice. This is one of the demonstrations from the course. I do offer, in addition to teaching principles each week, I show how I might use that principle in my own studio practice. And if you are a person who's slowly transitioning from step-by-step painting lessons to painting more independently, you can feel free to follow along with those demos. What I really like is when people adapt them and transform them to suit your own learning style and the subjects you're interested in. So this is one of the lessons from the course where I take a painting I've done before and I challenge myself to change it up to be a little looser. And actually, as I look at this, I'm thinking I might just have to try an even looser version and this time around and change it up dramatically again. I have the freedom to do that. I get to do whatever I want in my artistic journey. Week 2, we move into some tech. Basically, we spend some time working with techniques techniques are artistic principles. So week 2, we really start looking at values. Value being the range of light to dark and the contrast in your paintings. And we start really working to train our eyes to see, not based on the colors, not based on the objects in our scene, but based on the values. And this works really well, not just for landscapes and portraits and the things that aren't landscapes, florals, my mind just went blank, but it actually works for abstract painters as well. Value is a foundational technique that can make our paintings more dynamic, no matter what subject we're using. Learning value vision, learning that ability to see value, it's a lifetime experience. The more I train myself to think about values, the easier it has become. And the more subtle my eye has gotten at discerning value and picking out the value patterns. I like to simplify the values in a scene, and I use tools that help me evaluate and not get distracted. My number one goal for my paintings is how to make them as simple as possible so I have a strong foundation that's not distracted by all the little details, and mastering values is a big part of that. This is actually a peek at one of the demos from the course, and I know that's not a watercolor painting. What actually happened is I fell so in love with that little flower study that I did in the lower part of the picture that I carved it out of a rubber block and I made a stamp and I painted it in watercolor. That's what happens when you have a good foundation. It can make beautiful art in all kinds of forms. Week 3, we start adding color, working with using color intentionally. That means choosing colors that will define the mood in our painting. How to use color to unify a painting rather than having just colors splashed all over the place. And how to mix color more confidently by following some simple principles. Color doesn't have to be complicated. I know it can feel that way. I have over 100 colors in my palette, and so sometimes it can feel overwhelming knowing what to pick. So we talk about some foundational tips just to help simplify. How to use dynamic neutrals, which comes from good color mixing, and how we combine color and value to make more powerful paintings. This is one look at one of the lessons from that week 3. We actually use one palette of colors, some orange, blue, violet, that yellow, green, and we create 2 paintings that are actually really dramatically different, and it's pretty fun to do that. And see how just by mixing colors we can make them more vibrant or more subtle and muted. Principle number 4, we look at thinking compositionally. This is where things get really fun. In the first 3 weeks, we're really kind of just getting a feel for the course, getting in gear with this mindset of learning and growth. Plus, we're tackling some pretty big subjects. Color theory and value are things you kind of spend the whole rest of your life learning as artists. So by the time we get to principle 4, we're ready to let loose a little bit and start thinking compositionally. This is actually a lot of fun. This is where you take your artistic license and get to really explore how to make your painting more dynamic by studying how the different shapes interact in the scene. We learn to see composition, starting with a reference photo, learning how to simplify our scene, and figuring out our focal point and the visual pathway people use to go through and observe your painting. We paint the same subject multiple times. getting getting our composition a little bit simpler every time. And I go back to all the time, how do I simplify? How do I make this more dynamic? By simplifying. And that really is the key. So there's multiple versions of one reference photo, and you can see how it just changes every time. We do a value study, we work with basic colors, and we get to really play and simplify and make it more dynamic. And actually, if you look behind me on the wall, this side, that is the same scene as you can see in the slides. I have painted that scene literally a dozen times. It's one of my favorite subjects to paint. Okay, principle number 5, things just keep getting more fun from here. This week is week free to be me. This is where we get to experiment and learn the rules and break them like an artist. I really believe that your inner artist is found through playful experimentation. We need to figure out that mindset where we can abandon fear and paint with playful confidence. And I do that by sharing with you 3 experiments you can try to shake up your watercolor practice and lead to breakthroughs. There's a stencil demonstration, we work with some Yupo, and we do a gouache masking technique that I don't show here, but it's kind of a crazy experiment. And doing those crazy experiments really tell us a lot about ourselves, our personality, and the things that interest and excite us as we paint. Our childish playfulness. And then week 6, we kind of continue in that vein with practicing fearlessness. This is where I get to pull you into my studio with the goal of having you leave the course feeling fearless and free to fly on your own. And so really in week 6, I work to encourage you by showing you how I teach myself, developing a painting concept from that first reference photo to something that makes me really excited. I demonstrate how to use mistakes to develop your skill and style rather than feeling despair when you mess up, and just countering those fearful thoughts. What have you learned through overworking a painting? What happens when there's nothing left to lose because a painting has failed? When we make mistakes, we learn to find solutions. And that's a really exciting part of the process, is seeing where those mistakes take you in directions you never thought you would go. Okay, I'm going to tell you a little bit about joining Watercolor Mastery. I'm going to answer some questions. And I know we have questions. And I want to tell you just a little bit, before we get there, I want to tell you just a little bit about how the course works. Watercolor Mastery is an online course that you get lifetime access to. Yes, we drip out the content in 6 weeks of modules. So week 1, you have content, week 2, more content comes, and so forth. If for some reason life happens, that's okay. You still have those lessons there for you to take when you're ready. We want to make it as easy as possible for you to be involved in the course. This course is about you growing your skills and feeling free to paint the way you've always dreamed. And so, I like to say yes as much as possible and to make it easy for you to do that. You can choose how much you want to participate. Once you're enrolled, and enrollment opens September 28th. We'll talk about that in a minute. Once you've enrolled in the course, once enrollment opens, the course is always available for you at learn.angelafair.com. Even before the course starts, because we do kick everything off October 11th, but even before the course starts, you can log in there once you're enrolled and move around and get acquainted with the site. There will be a supply list, totally optional supplies. Ideally, work with a basic set of your own watercolor paint and colors that you already know and like. The extensive supply list is mainly to give you that list of what I'm using, and then during the course, if you start to feel like some of those items would be helpful for your own watercolor journey, then go ahead and buy them. I don't want you spending hundreds of dollars on watercolor supplies before you even start the course. There will be also some introductory information to help you get acquainted with the site And you will also receive an invitation to join the Fearless Artist community. That's where we'll be sharing what we've learned, and I'll be inviting you also to join those weekly live recaps, and they'll be on the Fearless Artist community as well. Watercolor Mastery is an online course. You get lifetime access to the course and can go through it at your own pace. The interactive portion, the part where I'm giving feedback and we're connecting and sharing our work together, happens on the Fearless Artist community. So it's kind of a two-part thing. And the interactive portion runs for those 6 weeks, October 11th to November 22nd. The Fearless Artist community is actually up and running right now. It's also a membership site where students get access to my other online courses, not Watercolor Mastery, it's a separate thing, and can interact and share what they're learning there as well. So you'll have the benefits of being a part of the Fearless Artist community, that interactive dynamic, and you'll have Watercolor Mastery, the online course. Hopefully that makes sense. And I will answer questions if you're still blanking out or if it still seems confusing. So yeah, Robin's going to post any questions that have been asked that I haven't answered yet. Robin, you can go ahead and post those in the chat and then I will answer them. I know also as we start to wrap up the lesson here that this is where most instructors would start pushing you to enroll. Often in one of these online live information sessions, they give you a time-sensitive offer, you can only join if you sign up right now. I'm not going to do that. I know that Watercolor Mastery can create transformation, but only if you're truly ready to take this step. If your heart is ready for mastery, you don't need a hard sell from me. And that's why I'm sharing this lesson, today's live broadcast, now, a full week before enrollment opens. I want you to be really sure that this is what you need. So next week, you'll hear from me again. I'll be sending out a link to a live question and answer session. So if you have questions about Watercolor Mastery that don't get answered in this lesson, you can feel free to email me. It's info@angelafair.com, and I'll cover those in the question and answer session at the same time next week, and you'll get an email about that. Again, a Watercolor Mastery enrollment. Actually, I have a window about that. Let's switch back to that. A Watercolor Mastery enrollment opens September 28th. That's next week. And there's a link there to the site. I will be sending emails. If you got an email about this live lesson, you will also be hearing from me next week, inviting you to join Watercolor Mastery. The course itself starts October 11th. We like to give you a little bit of time to gather your supplies, to start getting into that mastery mindset. You can see the cost there as well. It's $249 US, $330 Canadian. And space is limited. It's not super limited, but we do like to cap it at about 200 students so that we have a good, not an overwhelming dynamic of people contributing in the community. We want it to be interactive, but we still want that smaller group feel. 200 people sounds like a lot, but out of that percentage, there's a fewer, smaller percentage that's actually active in the community. So actually that's a really nice number for us to be able to feel like we're getting to know each other, and for me to be able to give that coaching and instruction that you need. Now, let's see here. That's most of my notes. So this is where I'll go and answer your questions here, and take a look now. Okay, so great questions. Lisa says, will this course help me slow down and take the time to paint meaningfully? That's, some of this is up to you. Definitely that is a big part of Watercolor Mastery, is just training our minds to think and to pause. And it's funny because personally, I feel like I learn what I'm ready to learn. And I've seen it time and time again that I just don't feel like I have what it takes to take that next step to where I want to grow to. But if I'm patient with myself, if I trust the process, I see the growth happen. I focus on the things that I'm working to change right now. And I'm trusting there will be time for the other stuff that I don't know I'm doing wrong yet, if that makes sense. Um, let's see here. La Pfeiffer says, Lisa, it's like kind of like a gym membership. You have to work it. Just joining won't get results. It's true. And that's one reason that we've priced Watercolor Mastery at that rate of $249 US, is because investing in a course, well, for one thing, it's really worth it. But investing in a course where you do have to take that leap and pay a little bit more than you might have paid for another course of mine in the past, it helps you focus your intention and really put in what you've put into it, if that makes sense. I need to focus on my questions here. Let's see if I can do this right. One thing that I've offered, and if you've taken Watercolor Mastery in the past, feel free to mention so in the comments and say you're an alumni or alumnus. And what I offer is, if you've taken Watercolor Mastery once before, you are welcome to do a do-over, to go through the interactive portion of it again with us. That is something that may not be available next year, because this is actually the last time we'll be offering Watercolor Mastery in this format. It's going through a major revamp next year. I don't know how to phrase it. I guess I just, we don't know yet. It's the main thing. We love this Watercolor Mastery course. But one thing I've noticed is that because it includes paint along with me demos, sometimes students tend to lean on those a little heavier than you need to. So we're going to a more principle based with fewer demos next year. So if you love those demos and really want to commit to a course that not only offers principles but has those step-by-step, this is how you paint this subject, we have a little bit of both in this Watercolor Mastery. We're going away from it even more next time. What that means for this existing Watercolor Mastery is that anyone who has enrolled in it up until this year will still have access, but it may not be available publicly again. I hope that makes sense. Okay, Nancy comments, I need more specific feedback about the things that are happening on the paper that I can't seem to troubleshoot or solve. I need more than just encouragement or log brush miles. Would Watercolor Mastery have that type of specific coaching? My goal, Nancy, is that we do address some of those things. Now, it is a challenge always to troubleshoot issues on the internet, because of course I don't get to watch you painting them. I just see the result. But often we can kind of, often through watching the demos, again, demos can be a really good thing for that. You can see some, examples of how I use watercolor and to avoid some of those issues. And I can see in your posted work, oh, this student's using a little too much water and it's pooling in this way in this corner. And so I can give specific instruction on things like that. So hopefully that helps answer that question. Kaz says, I feel comfortable with the first stages of what the course offers and technicals. What I need help to ramp up my style to express what's inside me. Will this course help me? Kaz, I believe, and I've seen your work because you've been a member of our Fearless Artist community. I think that you would be one of those artists that wouldn't need necessarily the step-by-step videos that are along with the course. It's leaning on those principles and working with them. I believe that in those 6 principles that are offered in the course, we really are giving that solid foundation for this is where students who are strong and painters who are strong and independent and building that self-study habit, this is where we go. When I am painting and I want to make a strong painting, I go back to the principles in these 6 principles every time. I look to those principles as my foundation for creating my own studio work. And so this is why I teach this course, to give you that foundation of those same principles. So I think there's something here for you. One thing I haven't mentioned is that we do have, once the course opens, you have 2 weeks to decide whether or not Watercolor Mastery is a fit for you. So we do offer that 14-day from course opening. It's not 30 days after you buy, because that doesn't quite, well, it might work. Trying to crunch dates in my head. I wanted to make sure you had time to work some of the lessons in the course, to skim over them quickly if you want in those first 2 weeks. If it feels like it's not a good fit, if it's like trying on someone else's shoes, then you're welcome to ask for that refund and we will grant it. Yes, Robin, my assistant, is one of our alumni. Robin and I actually got to know each other, and it worked into a job for her with taking Watercolor Mastery. Lisa's an alumni, and Lisa and I met as well at my workshop in Ontario just recently, and it was really great to see, Lisa, the body of work you created when you went through Watercolor Mastery in the spring, and see how your skills and your style have grown and evolved due to the workshop. Barb is asking about our membership to the Fearless Artist community and the Watercolor Mastery. With Watercolor Mastery, you get access to the Fearless Artist community site. That is where, as Watercolor Mastery students, you will interact. It is included with your Watercolor Mastery purchase, access to the Fearless Artist community right through to the middle of January. And I had one more thing. Paint Lady asks, is space limited for alumni as well? We really try to keep it around the 200 cap, but when it comes to our alumni coming back, we do have a little bit more flexibility there. Basically, if we're at 200 and number 201 shows up knocking at the door and desperate to join the course, we're not going to say no. We have a little flexibility there. Patra asked, what is more special in the mastery course than what I can find in the community? I think I've answered that, Patra, but I will just go over that one more time. We have a website. If you're not, well, let me think about the best way to describe this. If you are feeling like you're not quite ready for Watercolor Mastery, our Fearless Artist community might be a place for you to spend some time. And you can learn about what's in the Fearless Artist community at learn.angelafair.com. Members of the Fearless Artist community, people who are part of the community already, are paying $30 a month or $300 a year. There's a monthly or annual option to receive access to the community, where I do usually a couple of live online lessons a month. And they also get access, as long as they're members, to my online courses, basically everything that I've made except Watercolor Mastery, you can take those courses in your own time. So it's a really good option if you're a beginning painter and you want some step-by-step instruction, you want to take some beginner courses, and you want to have a community of your peers to work with. That is all available in the Fearless Artist community. So if you're not ready for Watercolor Mastery today, check out the Fearless Artist community option. All of that is outlined and detailed at learn.angelafair.com. Watercolor Mastery is definitely different than being a member of the Fearless Artist community. It's very focused, 6 weeks of study where we observe, where we learn those 6 principles, again, that are foundational to my own creative practice, that have helped me become my own favorite artist. We work through those and we figure out how to apply them to your artistic journey and how those 6 principles can work for you so that you can create your most authentic and heart-guided work. That's what really gets me excited, and I love seeing my students transformed through this process. One thing we do is at the end of the 6 weeks, I encourage students to take every painting that they've worked on during that time period and spread them all out. Put them on your stairs and make a little gallery on the stairs. Spread them out on the floor and stand on a table and take a picture and see how your work has evolved and how the different paintings have informed each other. See how you've grown from day 1 to our final day. And it's really exciting to see the transformation. Even some students have made 20 paintings, some have made 50, some have made 100 and been really productive. And no matter how many, there's growth that's happening, and it's so exciting and encouraging to see. So I have a special place in my heart for my Watercolor Mastery alumni. And we have, Robin can send you a link if you want. We have pages and pages and pages of testimonials from people who have found huge growth during Watercolor Mastery, and we'd love to share that with you. Joe McDonald says, best of luck with the courses. I had totally planned to join as I loved your style, but I got very lucky and now have private in-person watercolor lessons with a professional here in town. That is awesome. One thing I think is that for some of us, in person is the way to go. We want to have somebody beside us, coming alongside and helping to guide us. Other times, that community of your peers, other students who are learning what you're learning, is really beneficial, and that's where a group workshop, or if that's not available, an online course can be really helpful. The other advantage to learning online is that ability to go back and revisit lessons. I've had students who've taken watercolor mastery stop on week 2 and go, this is what I need right now, and I have to spend more than a week on studying values. And they do. And that's and knowing that those 4 weeks of lessons that come after are always going to be available to them, that gives you that freedom to do that. Or if you go through all 6 weeks of the lessons and feel like you really need to spend more time backtracking, going back to focus on one area, it's still there for you. And as you grow, new aspects of what was taught in those courses will become relevant to you. So that's really exciting. What I really think, and it's so cool to see, is that when we first start painting, it's like growing as a child. We're short, we're down here, and some things just start flying over your head. And as you grow, those things that were flying over your head in the beginning, they start to hit you in the forehead, land on your brain. And this I'm really quite, sciencey about all this. They land in your brain, they trickle down and hit you in the heart. It takes some time for that to happen. And then it takes even a little more time for them to come out your fingers. So I see that happening in watercolor mastery as we get started. And as that growth starts to happen, it really kind of snowballs into further growth, and it gets really exciting. I appreciate your input here. I've got people commenting on being part of the Fearless Artist watercolor community. I love the community. It's such a supportive place. It's full of great people creating. It really is a community of watercolor lovers. And I like what Ellen's saying as well. I enjoyed the Fearless community for the month I joined, but I unsubscribed for a time, not because I didn't like it, but because I wanted to digest what I'd seen and learned. And that is totally fine. You can come and go as much as you like. Amanda's asking, when will this course be offered again if we aren't able to sign up for this one? I will be running Watercolor Mastery, the transformed version, because I'm always growing and learning. So I get to share even more new stuff, and maybe a little more boldly than I've been sharing in the past, because I always get braver about speaking with authority as I see the transformation it makes in students. And so there will be another round of watercolor mastery starting in the spring, I believe March, April, if all goes well, if my timeline works. I appreciate everyone's time. I want to bring up that screen again just to remind you of where to go and what to look for. I will be emailing everyone more information on Watercolor Mastery and how you can sign up around September 28th. We also have a second question and answer session happening on September 27th. And the course itself starts October 11th. We also do a prep week. We do October 4th. I start sharing some stuff to help you focus and be ready to kick off Watercolor Mastery on October 11th and really make the most of the course. If you're ready to commit to 6 weeks of intensive growth and focus on your watercolor journey, I want to make sure that you make the most of it and are as efficient as possible, although not too efficient, because efficiency kind of kills creativity. But we'll be, talking about that October 4th as we get started with prep week. So thank you all for joining me today. Robin, thank you for being on the chat and sharing links to info and catching those questions for me as well. I've been talking for 59 minutes, so I am ready for another big drink of water and maybe a coffee. And I will see you all next week. Also, I'll be up around on social media. If you're on Facebook or Instagram, I will be talking a little bit about mindset there as well this week as we think about really what does it take to be your own favorite artist. I love the work. I love my art, and I want you to love your art too. And really, that's what it's all about. So thanks for watching. Bye, everybody. I will hopefully see you in Watercolor Mastery in October. Bye for now.